My presentation is on the 25 overlooked security configurations on your switches and routers. You may know me from 3 years of server prizes and Capture the Flag at DEF CON. Also, you may remember last year I had a system with a modified kernel so that attackers had to get elevated privileges from a UID0 root shell. My employment, I do pen testing with a Fortune 500 consulting firm, and as part of that I do a lot of telecom environment. So as I said, I'll be speaking on router and switch misconfigurations. I'll be covering both Cisco and Foundry. I'm assuming some basic familiarity with router and switch configuration, but the slides are somewhat self-explanatory. So the way I came up with this is I started making a list one day of things that needed to be configured, and the list just kept getting longer and longer, and I was kind of surprised at how long it got, but so I chopped it off at 25, and that's what I'll be presenting. You must, I'll be presenting some of the general syntax of the commands that are involved in fixing some of these or mitigating, but you'll have to adapt these commands to your specific site configuration. So, your network. While you were busy making your network bigger, faster, and better by adding in all kinds of new, nifty new stuff, routing and switching and everything, you also made it possible to control the network itself. So basically, the old days where you just had a hub and you had to unplug everything or unplug something to make something go wrong, those days are officially gone. Now you can, it's possible to cause problems without physically interfering with anything. So basically, routers and switches are your network, and as such, they should be resistant to attack. So the first 10 are what I call the basics, and I'm going to say I can't really fault you for not having already fixed these. Basically, I'd say that mediocre sites would have 1 or 2 of these fixed. Fastest sites would be 4 to 6. And as I'll explain later, some of these can be fixed in other ways. But basically, the reason I call them the basics is you must understand the principles behind why these are the problems, even if you do not necessarily have all of them fixed. But I do say, though, 6 isn't good enough. So number 1 would be passwords. It may seem below you, but really you'd be surprised the number of people that need to be told to put passwords on their switches and routers. This includes the VTYs, the console port, the aux port. Basically, you've got to put a password on all of these. You can't just rely on well, I put one password and hopefully that covers it. Also, the enable password, you need to use the enable secret, which is an MD5 hash. If you use that's the 5. If you use the 7, the password can be decrypted. The problem is the VTY and the console and the aux ports cannot use the secret MD5 hash. So I'll be covering that later. Don't know if you can see that well enough, but number 2 is community strings. If you're still using public and private, really you should be ashamed of yourself. And you know, I hope those letters are big enough, big red letters, but really you'd be surprised. I see this a lot. I see this probably about a third of the time on some of the pen test jobs I go to, just on the routers and switches. If we're talking overall, it's probably above 50%. if we're talking like hosts. So what this means is a vulnerable managed device means your entire network is at risk. And one of the ways that would be possible is if you've got the SNMP, besides taking down a port or something on a switch, you can actually use SNMP to configure a spanning port. So suddenly now you're getting copies of all the traffic going to all the ports. That's one example of things you can do with SNMP. So you do not want people to have write access, and in fact, don't even give them read access if they don't need it. So number 3 would be logging in and using encryption. If you don't know that using Telnet is a problem, then you're just not getting it. Unencrypted connections are not the way to go anymore. Not that they ever were, but don't do it. So the other items are something that you may not be able to fix for some reason or another, something specific to your site. And that's why I said I'm not really going to judge you if for some reason you haven't addressed something, as long as you know the risk. SSH, on the other hand, an example where you really may not have a choice. You may not be able to get around it. So what I'm doing here is saying that if you can't put a SSH connection, you either need to go out of band like a serial line, so you do an SSH connection into another box and then go direct serial port to there, or to do something else to address the problem. But my recommendation is, if you can do it, to get equipment with SSH capable. So on a Foundry, that would be a Management 2 blade or better, and SSH into Cisco would require iOS 12 with an IPsec engine. And if you've got a lot of equipment, that could really mount up the cost. But hopefully you're able to get that. So number 4, source routing, and really you need to think spoof-o-matic. There's really no legitimate reason to be allowing source routing. In case you don't understand source routing is a way for packets to include in them the path of how to go where they're going. And so it's specified by the packet. So the packet could actually be coming from an attacker from an entire different location on the network, and a great way for IP spoofing. So the command to address that would be no IP source route. That's on both Foundry and Cisco. Number 5 would be the Subnet Broadcast. On layer 3 IP layer, you have an IP address that is a broadcast address for the entire subnet, and it's a great way to do denial of service. So it's involving like Smurf attacks. You send something to the broadcast address, and then every host on the subnet responds. So if you don't need it, don't use it. And I say on there, it might be a good idea to disable. That's a little sarcastic, as in same as it might be a good idea not to leave $100 bills lying on your car seat when you go shopping or something. So the command to disable that would be no IP directed broadcast. That's on both Foundry and Cisco. Number 6, this is Cisco specific, because Foundry by default does not have anything like this enabled. You want to turn off all the small services. both TCP and UDP. You may have read recently that there was a vulnerability, and I had some people ask me, you know, am I going to be speaking on that? The answer is no, because I recommend you don't even run it. Just turn those things off. Now there's a little bit of sanity check in some of this stuff. For example, that chargen will not respond to the echo port. By default, it does some checking there, but that's reassuring, but disable it anyway. You don't want it. Also, other things like finger. You know, finger's a great way to find out where the management stations are. You just look where the admin's coming from and say, okay, that's the box I need to take over. So just turn all of them off. So number 7, you might want to think about filtering connections to the router or switch itself. You know, why do you need to be able to connect from any host on the network to it? Do you just think that you're going to be walking around and need to connect to it, and because you've got some great idea that you can't run back all the way back to your desk to go do that? And this would be really scary also if it was like internet facing. It means that you're allowing anybody on the network, the outside network, to start testing passwords. So you want to restrict to the admin stations. There's a couple different ways to do that sort of thing, like the access list. You can reserve a TTY. There's a transport input command. There's a couple different ways. So you'll need to see how that applies to your specific configuration, what you want to do with that. Number 8 would be the config files themselves. If you recall earlier, I said that the MD5 password hash only happens on the enable password, does not happen on the other password. So all somebody needs to do is find this config file lying around somewhere on a TFTP server, or you know, even in your trash bin or something like that, and start busting your passwords. So you don't want to leave that. If you are doing something to a TFTP server, like to make a backup of your config, so you enable the server, you make a backup, and then you turn the server back off. Don't just leave your config files waiting for somebody to come fetch them. So number 9 would be log review. It would seem that to me that you would want to know who's doing what to your router or switch, and so you would want to collect the SNMP traps that you can set up on different events. That way that you would find out when somebody is doing failed authentication. Remember, like if you're not using public and private anymore for SNMP, somebody trying to brute force the SNMP community string would have to be doing it multiple times. And so when you have 100 events show up in your log file, if you're monitoring that, you're going to see, hey, somebody's trying to bust into my equipment here. So number 10 would be filtering private address space, or actually even space that's, if you know something about your specific subnets, like which ranges go where, you want to do that. Now, that may be something that you would configure. You would think, okay, that's a job of a firewall to do that. Well, why not put that in your routers as well, even between different subnets within your internal environment? If you know that sort of traffic isn't, you don't want that sort of traffic, then restrict it, filter it. So here I give some examples of some of the private address space. You're definitely not normal to see 127 traffic, and then you have the private address space of 10, 172.16 through 19, and 192.168. So if you're not using that as your own address space internal, you want to restrict that.
As in 16 to 31.
Sorry, I believe you're correct. 31. So okay, you'll want to restrict this sort of traffic. This prevents internal traffic from going to the outside and having fake addresses on the outside. Same thing for internal. And if everyone were doing this sort of thing, there would be no such thing as a distributed denial of service attack. So as I said, these are just the basics. Hopefully all of you understand the concepts behind all 10 of those, why those are problems. So now we're going to go through the other 15. As I say, some of these will put you even with the curve, and most will put you ahead of the curve. Vendors can sometimes they'll sometimes say things that are well-meaning generalizations on the security of their products or so on. When I say ahead of the curve, I mean that you're not going to be surprised when there turns out to be a tool that does something that the vendor swears was completely theoretical. And as I said, there were some other things on the list that didn't make it into the top 25. Personally, I'm the sort that believes that you should, if there's a way to authenticate it, do it. So like there's a NTP, there's a way to authenticate NTP. That did not make it into the top 25. The nitpicky stuff got pushed off the end. Okay, so dynamic routing keys. This is where you are authenticating that the routing update you receive is actually from the neighbor, and not that somebody's not spoofing your routing neighbor that you're expecting the update from. You would want to use different keys with each of your neighbors. That way, one neighbor could not send updates pretending to be some other neighbor that you had. So the way you would do that, these are the Cisco commands, would be using a keychain locked and then inputting a key string and a lifetime for each of the accept and sends. Continuing on, these are the Foundry commands. Create an IP protocol authentication key. And then also, depending on your site, you may want to use a distribute list to control what you're sending out. Now, if you remember earlier, I was talking about filtering dynamic routes filtering a private address space. At the same time here, it may be a good idea to actually filter the content of these routing updates. You always hear about, if you're setting up dynamic routing, that the backbones would get really angry if you start broadcasting routing paths to some of the private networks. My feeling is it's their fault for accepting it. So if you have some bogus route that you know that your network does not want to accept, this is a good chance to filter in the content of the routing updates. So the next one, number 12, would be user accounts. Most configurations, most sites just have one enable password, and they give it to all their admins. So everybody has this password. They have some kind of problem with their devices. they're not sure, okay, did somebody change the config? They talked to all their admins. Nobody seems to know. Nobody's willing to accept responsibility. So what do you do? Do you punish all the admins, or do you just figure, well, that they must not have been any of them doing something, must be some kind of power anomaly, or you get in that situation, you just don't know what's going on. So when you do that sort of thing, when you have a root cause analysis, it would be really great to know, okay, this admin logged in at this time, and they were the only one on the system at the time. So it would be a good idea to set up user accounts into your routers and switches. You can either use a login local or be using AAA and ACS. Next one would be ICMP Redirects, which is basically a variation on the source routing idea. This is where there's a ICMP packet says, oh, no, you're going the wrong way. That's not the right way anymore. You need to take this other path. So this is a great thing that you want to prevent some kind of spoofing attacks. So here we have the deny ICMP for Cisco, or no IP ICMP redirects for Foundry devices. Okay, here's the fun one. The port security and the static tables. This is only for the port security is only for Cisco. What it does is it prevents you can lock down a port to a specific hardware address, and that way, if there's any traffic using any other hardware address, it will shut down the port. This is really great for something where you have like a printer. The printers are sitting out in the open. That's a great way for somebody to just walk up to the network and plug in, and poof, they're connected to your network. And of course, you're running DHCP, so this guy doesn't need to have any brains at all to figure out what's going on. They just replace your printer port with their own machine, ask for an address, and your network has just provided them with access to do things on your network. So now, of course, this isn't a complete fix. There are some of the ways around this, around DHCP. Sniffers don't need IP addresses or so on. Also, people can spoof MAC addresses, but at least the port security prevents unauthorized hardware addresses from going out of the port. So to continue. So like I said, this is question?
I'm wondering if Intel Ether Express routers and switches enable port security, or if that's just Cisco.
Could you repeat the question?
Do Intel Ether Express switches have port security or something like it?
Question is, do Intel Ether Express switches have that? Unfortunately, I'm not versed in the port security on the what you're asking, the Intel Ether Express. I did look for a command on the Foundry equipment. If there is one on Foundry, I don't know about it. I can't find it. So this port security feature is something that I've only found on Cisco equipment. So, as I said, it's possible to change the hardware address of an Ethernet card, but this will at least raise the bar, make it more difficult for somebody to attack. Also, you remember I was speaking earlier about logging. If you know much about your equipment, you'll know that the switch is aware of when a device is unplugged and plugged back into a port, and so it will be able to tell you in real time, hey, somebody unplugged the printer, or somebody turned off the printer, or at least that the printer is not connected to the port anymore, and you will know that something's going on. Now, the port security is only to prevent unauthorized hardware addresses from going out of the port. It's nothing to do with packets going to the port. And so that's where you sort of have to have a defense in depth. You have to have a couple of different ways to address different sides of the problem. So you can actually configure static tables. In the Cisco and Cisco, it's called the CAM table. It's on any switch, it's just a table of the hardware addresses. And what happens is that the switch learns which port the hardware address is on, and then from then on, whenever it receives any traffic going to that hardware address, it only sends it out a particular port because it has it in this table. Hey, it's going out this port. And now the problem is if the switch somehow forgets what port that hardware address is on, it will, when it receives another packet to that hardware address, it will have to flood it to all the ports. This is how some of the sniffing through a switch works. I've found that on Cisco equipment, at least the table can hold up to, I believe, 64,000 entries. Also, the CAM table on Cisco is a FIFO, not an LRU, so it is fairly difficult, but still, this is something that you probably want to lock down. So if you insert a static entry into the CAM table, or any switch's hardware address table, then the switch will not be confused. It will not have to learn what port that hardware address is on. It will know, hey, it's on this port all the time. Don't know if you can see that at the very bottom. I say if the switch, the reason why you would prevent that is because if there is some kind of broadcast traffic, the attacker will be able to see that, and if that traffic happens to be an SNMP packet, it will contain a SNMP community string. So there you can see somebody may be able to attain the SNMP right community string, and then they set themselves up as a spanning port, and then they're able to attain all the traffic. So that's why you want to put it in static entries into the table. Here we have the commands for Cisco and Foundry. This will at least eliminate the learning period. Now, this may be a little too extreme for many of you. I do actually know of a company that's locking down 1,000 machines by hardware address. So, as I said, you need to determine your own needs. Then before I continue, you may also want to put in static ARP entries as well into the switch for like the management stations and so on. So that's another thing that you may want to take care of. So the next thing, you want to authenticate SNMP. Now the problem is that secure SNMP really has been kind of vapor. Something we keep hearing about that, someday there's going to be secure SNMP. Well, it's just not out there yet. So the best thing we have so far is a keyed, meaning authenticated SNMP, which is version 2 on Cisco. I do not believe that Foundry supports SNMP version 2 yet. Now, the way to configure this is instead of configuring SNMP, SNMP server a community, you need to configure a party instead. If you use the word community, if you use the string community, it will configure for SNMP version 1. And so with a authenticated SNMP, you're able to authenticate that it really is coming from the legitimate management station.
Question for you.
Yes.
Do you have to set the SNMP party for every appliance on the network for that to work? Those particular appliances?
Do you mean that, do you have to use SNMP version 2 for every device on your network? No, although you may run into problems if you have some sort of management software that's trying to do SNMP version 2 to only your routers and switches, and then version 1 to some other devices like your hosts or so on. It would depend on your software, but in Cisco, if you put in the string community, it will go to version 1. It will not be version 2. You need to use party to keep it to version 2. Okay, the next one, number 16, is SNMP access list. Now, if you remember a bit earlier, I said that you would want to restrict like a login into your device to only come from the management stations, not from just any device on the network. This is basically the same thing for SNMP. So that your device only accepts SNMP from a legitimate management station. Now, of course, you can still have a spoofing problem. This does at least raise the bar. And combined with other defense techniques, like a private secure network or lockdown ports or so on, you have a defense in depth. So on Cisco, you would be configuring SNMP server access list by the list number, and on Foundry, you need to configure three different ones: one for the client of SNMP, and similarly a telnet client and a web client. So on Foundry, there's one specific just for SNMP. Okay, we got another one here, another good one. VPNs. Now, I don't know about the industry in general, but I define a VPN as a virtual private network that is via an insecure path. And in order for it to be through an insecure path, you have to have authentication to prevent injection and also to prevent eavesdropping. That is what I mean when I say private. Now, there's a way to configure a tunnel encapsulation. Despite what you may have heard from your vendor, that is not the same as a VPN. The reason is there is no cryptography used to prevent disclosure or packet injection. Actually, I've got a funny story on that. Unfortunately, I'm under NDA, but trust me, tunnel encapsulation is not the same as a VPN. So the way you know that you're really configuring a VPN is you will need to configure the key management protocol with the policies, the keys, configuring the algorithm you're going to use in the transform set, also mapping what connections are going to go through that. So if you don't see those commands, you're not configuring a VPN. Similarly, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the newer multi-protocol label switching. Despite the vendor speaking of it being a VPN, really you need to think of it, of MPLS as a virtual circuit, not as a VPN. There's no cryptography involved. So think virtual circuit. Number 18, VLANs. You should not let VLANs share a common port. The reason is when you share a port, like for example, you configure, okay, this hardware address goes this way into this VLAN, and this other hardware address goes this other way into another VLAN. You've made it a de facto gateway between VLANs, and don't do it. Okay, I don't know if some of you may think that you need to route ARP packets. I'm not going to make that judgment call, but if you can't think of a specific reason why you need to do that, this is how you would disable it, disabling Proxy ARP. That command works on both Cisco and Foundry. If you don't want to disable it completely, you could use access lists on specific ports, because what you want to do is prevent some sort of ARP hijacking and setting ARP timeouts. You can also, I was speaking earlier about port security, setting up static ARP entries. Here are the commands for both Cisco and Foundry. That way you are protecting against ARP hijacking. Okay, the next one here is, this is layer 3, the IP layer. It's possible to limit the packet rates. So here's a couple of the commands for, the first ones are for Foundry, setting the burst limits and the burst maximums. Also setting up timeouts on with the lockup. Now then on Cisco you would be able to configure the rate limits for ICMP and SYN rates. This is something in terms of like a denial of service attack, distributed denial of service attack, like a Smurf or so on. So that was layer 3. It's also possible to put rate limits on layer 2. So the first command, unknown unicast limit, that would be putting limits on the Ethernet frames that are not in the table yet. Then also setting limits on broadcast, multicast, and then on Cisco setting limits on the ports.
Is there a rule of thumb or any way to determine what a reasonable limit is?
The best way to determine rule of thumb on the rate limit is find out what your network is like now. Of course, one part of that would be make sure you're not under attack when you do the check, but hopefully you can distinguish that. So find out what your normal rate limits, or find out what your normal rate expectation is, and then look for peak activity, of course, and set your limit somewhere above that. This is something where if you were under attack, maybe you would want to set the limit a bit lower. So really it's site specific, depend on your traffic loads. So as I said, this is layer 2 to contrast with the previous one, which was layer 3. This is kind of a little-known command to check the reverse routes on packets. This is for routing. A spoof packet generally, often will come in on a different port than it was supposed to come from, and if your paths are symmetric, and this is very important, your paths must be symmetric. In other words, it goes in and out the same port. You can use a verify reverse path. So that way the router determines when a packet comes in, it says, okay, is that packet supposed to have come from that port? If it's not, then the router knows to drop that packet. Now this is, as I say, this is going beyond the simple access list of, this port block specific network ranges and so on. This actually determines at the time of when the packet arrives whether or not it was supposed to come from that port. So it's the verify unicast reverse path. Now this is only on Cisco. I don't have a corresponding command for Foundry. Now the LLC, this is a really fun one because a lot of people have the opinion that LLC packets are just these harmless little packets that come over your network every once in a while, and what could be wrong with those? Well, LLC isn't as harmless as you think. First of all, you have the Cisco Discovery Protocol. This is more of a information sort where it's carrying information that you may not want an attacker to know. Also, it's identifying the most important equipment on your network. It's the Cisco equipment saying, hey, look, I'm important. And I've actually had situations where I was listening for that and said, oh, Cisco Discovery Protocol, that must be an important piece of equipment. Obviously, this is specific to Cisco. Here we have the commands for the routing switch module and the Catalyst OS. Now, continuing on to the spanning tree protocol. It's another one of these harmless little packets that go flying around, and what could be wrong with that? Well, the problem is you need to understand, well, what does spanning protocol do? Spanning protocol is designed to detect and prevent loops at layer 2. So in other words, if you have two ports that are connected together or forming some sort of loop, you do not want a packet to go out one port and come back in the other and then just keep going around and around and around. That would seriously hose your network if you had that sort of thing happening. So the spanning tree protocol the purpose of it is to find loops in your network and then turn off the ports, turn off passing traffic to enough links so that there's only one way to each node in the network. So you think about that. Well, so the purpose of it is to turn off ports. Well, that sounds kind of scary. So do you really think it's still harmless? So you can imagine two scenarios. You either have it turn back on a port that was supposed to have been blocked, or have it turn off ports that were supposed to be on. Both of those would be equally scary. So what you want to do is configure the spanning tree to only go through trusted devices. Now, to only accept changes from trusted devices. So it's looking for loops still, but you want to prevent somebody from interfering with that sort of thing. Now, a similar idea would be if you have some particular device that you want to be the root of the spanning tree. Can't hurt to make your own device the root. That way somebody else can't plug in and say, hey, you know, I'm the spanning tree root. So the way to do that is to use on the Catalyst OS, set span tree root, or disable with a number. Then on the Foundry, you set a spanning priority, or you can turn off the spanning tree completely. Now the next one would be the scheduler. Cisco actually recommends setting scheduler limits. That way when the device is under attack, it's not spending all of its time responding to the traffic, that it actually has some time to get back and let you change the configuration or something to that effect. So that you would be setting the scheduler to allow a minimum amount of time to management functions. Now, of course, that does actually decrease the amount of time that's set aside to handling traffic. So you need to understand what this command is for, and I've actually seen people configure it the opposite, thinking, hey, you know, I want the maximum performance out of my device. Well, the problem is, if it's under attack, you're going to want to be able to connect to it, especially if it's a remote device, and you can't just like walk up and unplug everything and then take care of the problem. So last one, number 25, would be the virtual or the hot standby routing protocol, or VRRP is the generic term. So if you think about this, this is actually a protocol where the routers agree which routers don't pass traffic. Well, that sounds kind of scary. This is actually, it is possible to configure a plain text authentication string. So basically it makes it the same as a SNMP community string in terms of security. It's a plain text authentication string. But that's, of course, better than nothing. Now, actually, I believe this only takes effect on reboots, but still, you probably want to keep somebody from being able to tell your routers don't route traffic. So the way to configure the authentication string is using the standby with the authentication string. So I've got a couple of links here that I wanted to present to you if you want to go find out more information. This first one, number 21, that is a document by Cisco on how to improve the security of your device. The second link is just a giant page of Cisco security topics. It's massive. They cover just about everything that you can think of. In fact, it's almost too big. There's just so many things to choose from. You have to do a search pretty much to find what you're looking for. And then the third one, if you want to learn about the SSH version 1, the link's kind of long, but there it is. So those are the Cisco links. Question?
Notwithstanding the problems with UDP, what are your thoughts about using the remote syslog capability?
The problems with using remote syslog in terms of like logging, you mean?
You mentioned SNMP traps, but remote syslog can capture actual violations.
Yes, that's a good point, that if you are doing remote logging and it's not over an out-of-band system, the attacker may be able to intercept the traffic, see the events that are failing. That's really something you have to decide on your specific site in terms of the other factors that you've done to your network in terms of like locking down the ports or so on. Something else you could do is possibly have a server which is either directly connected or located nearby the device. Located nearby the device to receive it and then encrypt it and pass it on to the central management station. My feeling is that even though a lot of the traffic that you see in the syslog may not directly help somebody break into a system, it's still an information gathering tool. You see what's going on. So I'm kind of iffy about it, but I can't say definitively one way or the other. So here we have the Foundry links. They actually changed the URL on me. The one that's in your printed copy says there's a tech docs directory that has now been replaced with the services documentation. So replace that with where tech docs go. So we have a couple of links here that'll help you get started on this on Foundry security. So basically, I just say, it's great that your network is working okay, but that doesn't mean that everything is okay. So don't take your network security for granted. Okay, question?
The HRTP protocol, is that a encapsulated IP or is it in the same open door?
You talking about the hot standby routing?
Is it a router or is it the same open door?
Well, the devices which do perform the hot standby routing, they're all going to be on the same network because they're sharing both an IP address and they're sharing a hardware address. So basically, you've got a couple of different devices. They're all sitting right next to each other, and so they're communicating directly over the same network. Do you mean to like have a standby router that is like separated by a WAN link or something? I don't think so. I think they're all going to be right next to each other. And as I said, it is a clear text protocol. So you're going to have to prevent the hot standby routing traffic from being intercepted by somebody else, because it's just like SNMP. They see the authentication string, and there it is. Sorry, repeat the question. Are all the other devices turned off, you mean? Yes. The question is all the hot standby devices need to be on in order to communicate? The answer is yes, because they're only doing that at the time of reboot. So that's why I'm saying that this may be something that you can only perform the attack at the time the router is rebooted, but still it's something you want to prevent somebody from being able to attack you in some way. Yes, basically by definition, the routers are going to be on the same local segment. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there a way to completely turn it off?
Is there a way to completely turn off hot standby routing? Oh, yes. Hot standby routing is something that you would need to configure to turn on.
By default, it's on.
Yes. So if you are turning it on because you want redundant routing, then this is something that you need to worry about. Any other questions?
You found the dynamic routing keys. Does each one of them have to share their own keys, or do you just supply one to one router that has to supply that key?
Dynamic routing, you mean can you have one key that goes to all your neighbors?
No. What I'm saying is, if you have two routers, right, there's the neighboring routers, do each one of them have to supply a key to each other, or is it just one way?
You can set up keys bidirectional.
But does it have to be that way?
I don't believe so. So for maximum security, you would want to configure different shared secrets for all the devices which are a different security equivalency. So anything which is a different security equivalency, you would want to configure a different shared secret. Any other questions?
On the layer 3 packet limiting?
Yes.
That's for ICMP and SIP. What about UDP? For all of that?
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any way to do that.
We have to rely on the level.
Yeah. I'd hope to be able to bring my assistant here today. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to come. As I said, I do penetration testing, so I have kind of more of a wide experience. I have an assistant who only does switch and router configuration, so maybe we can hook up and try and answer to your specific question. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.